Hi, it's TT here from My Sacred Blood. Welcome back to the only channel on YouTube that focuses exclusively on truly holistic menstrual care. If you haven't already, do check out the website. Digital coaching sessions are now available for download, and new digital coaching sessions are always posted on the first Monday of every month. If you are already on the website, consider joining the mailing list by filling out that little form below. And of course, share this video with at least one person who you feel will benefit from this content. In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 things that everyone should know about periods. This is specifically for teens, but it can really apply to anyone. So we'll begin with the first and most important thing, and that is, where do periods begin? You've probably heard it said before that the menstrual period or menstruation begins with the bleeding. Although that is actually true, it is technically false. Why is that? Because before you can have a menstrual period, you first have to have an unfertilized egg that disintegrates or that is reabsorbed into the body. And before that can happen, an egg has to generate. And that phase of the cycle is called the follicular phase. And so the very first period that you ever had or will ever have actually begins a few weeks before you saw your first blood or before you had your menarche. And the very last period that you'll ever have is not the beginning of a new cycle. It's actually the end of your whole menstrual life cycle or reproductive life cycle. So the menstrual cycle does begin with the follicular phase of the cycle. Then something called the luteinizing hormone will trigger the release of the mature egg, and then that egg, if it's not fertilized, will be disintegrated or reabsorbed by the body. At this time, the luteinizing hormone is still coursing through your body, and so the luteal phase continues on until you menstruate. As you hit the menstrual phase, a new egg is just starting to generate, and so there is some overlap. There's an overlap with the menstruation phase and the follicular phase. There's some overlap with the luteal phase and the ovulation phase. And so there's a lot of overlap in the menstrual period. There's a lot going on at the same time. So generally, when the bleeding time begins, the follicular phase is already beginning. And that brings me to fact number 2 that every teen should know about periods. And that is that, yes, you are hormonal. The other day, I was in a mood and someone asked me, "Are you on your period?" And I had to take a moment and think, you know what? No, I'm not on my period, but I am in the luteal phase, the later half of the luteal phase. And so, yes, I am hormonal. So I can't be upset when someone asks, "Are you on your period?" or "You're hormonal." And they say things like that to assume that your hormones are dictating your actions, behaviors, thoughts, etc. Because that is true. There's no point in getting upset about it. In fact, hormones rule the body. Those chemical messages that course up and down the spine and all throughout the body are running all of the time. You are always hormonal. If you were not hormonal, then you would be dead. So it's not offensive. It might sound offensive if someone assumes that you're on your period, but we are past all that stigma. And if someone wants to know, are you on your period? Are you acting this way because you're on your period? Or are you acting this way because you're hormonal? Then the simple answer should be yes. Yes, I am. Because like I said, everyone is hormonal, and males are actually more hormonal than females are. The male reproductive system is always creating sperm. It's constantly at work. That luteinizing hormone that I mentioned before that triggers ovulation, it controls the ovaries in females. In men, luteinizing hormone controls the testes or the gonads. And whereas the female reproductive system runs on a monthly cycle, the male reproductive system actually runs on a daily cycle. They're constantly hormonal. Testosterone and progesterone is constantly rising and falling. The only difference between females and males is that with the males, they're constantly having to control that fluctuation of hormones. So they kind of have more of an opportunity to get better at it. And that's probably why they do things like play sports or video games or watch sports or video games, so that they can kind of balance out their hormones or have something to keep them occupied or keep them from thinking too much about their hormones. They never have to really focus on it for a week or weeks at a time like females do have to do that. In a previous video, I talked about the pathologization of menstruation. The video is called Period Disease, if you want to check that one out. In that video, I mentioned a disease called late luteal phase dysphoric disorder, what's now called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and that's really, really bad PMS. And something tells me that that name change was more done in order to take the attention off the fact that males also go through a late luteal phase dysphoric disorder, and they do it daily by the hour, really. Now, speaking of PMS, that brings me to the fourth fact that every teen and everyone should know about periods, and that is that with all that pain, it can be tempting to want to just dull it all, to numb it all with drugs. But I would recommend just say no to drugs just for maybe the first year of your menstrual cycle, as much as you can, if at all possible, if you're not dealing with really, really bad premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And why do I recommend that? Because we tend to build up a tolerance to whatever drug we take, whether it be alcohol, cigarettes, or painkillers. We tend to want more of it because we develop a tolerance for the drug, and so we tend to want or need more in order to dull the pain, and that can cause the pain to get a lot worse than it had originally been. So I would suggest that for your first period and for the months to follow, just kind of get a feel for what your periods are like. Maybe your first period was difficult, and maybe after a while the pain will subside a little. Maybe after a while you get used to it, you'll understand it a little more, you'll know how to deal with it, and maybe use natural remedies to deal with it. And maybe later on, if the pain just starts to be so unbearable that you just can't deal with it, you might consider painkillers, over-the-counter painkillers. Aside from that, I would suggest just staying away from it. Once again, say no to drugs just for the first month of the beginning of your reproductive cycle. That way you get to understand your cycle. And when you understand your cycle, you're better able to prioritize your period and make it work for you. And that brings me to the final fact, number 5, that every teen and everyone, especially parents of children who may be going through puberty, should know about periods. Before you even get to your first period, it's important to be ready for it. When you are ready for it, then you're better prepared to deal with it. So I would suggest that if you are a teen or preteen, or if you're a parent of a teen or preteen who's starting to get hormonal, who's starting to change in attitude and behavior and so on, then recognize that that may be the end of puberty and the start of young adulthood. And so it's good to start getting ready. So start putting away some of those pads, maybe get some reusables, and invest in those quality menstrual care products that you can start with when the bleeding time comes. So I love period prepping. I love being ready, always staying ready and prioritizing my period, understanding it, knowing when it's going to come. I think it's really important. When you do that, then you can avoid some of that interruption that menstruation tends to cause in your life. That is it for this one. I hope that helps, or at least gave you something to think about. Remember, I'm here every moon day at noon. That is Eastern time. Until the next one, take care of yourself.